Welcome to Constitutional Soundbites by Sat Media. Welcome, Dave.
Hello, Matt. It's great to be back with you
Yes.
again for our second
Inaugural.
edition.
Yes.
Our second
Wow,
edition.
yeah. This is the first official one, though.
This is the first official one.
Yes.
We're actually going to get into the book, Constitutional Soundbites, today. We kind of gave background on why the book exists last time. So,
Exactly.
and but nevertheless, there was some. I'd like to think there was a few interesting little constitutional tidbits built into that. Like, I don't know. July 4th, 1776 was the founding of the country.
Yeah.
And not everybody knows that.
Not everybody knows it.
So it's worth repeating.
Yes. Yes. And not everybody knows that they actually have rights.
Yes.
So.
Or where they come from.
Or where they come
from. Or where they come from.
Yeah. And so, with the book, why don't we jump right into the prologue, and we'll start with there and the opening paragraph. I might as well read it.
That'd be great.
Okay. So, on September 17, 1787, the Constitutional Convention finished its work and sent the proposed Constitution out to the states for approval. Within a single day, 500 English language copies of the proposed Constitution were printed for distribution to elected officials around the country. So, even with that first paragraph, I think we got a lot to talk about there.
There's a lot to talk about right there to begin with, because, of course, one of the things to consider is that in 1787, well, they didn't have interstate highways.
Right.
They didn't have PDF files that they could email to people. They literally had to take and deliver 500 copies to the elected officials in the 13 states. And so it took some time to get from southern Georgia up to Maine, Rhode Island,
right?
That area of the country. So it was a big deal distributing.
That's
this.
An effort. Really.
Yeah, it was a big deal distributing the Constitution in 1787. But on the other hand, they were sitting in what we now call Independence Hall, which is where they both drafted the Declaration of Independence and where they had spent 5 months drafting the Constitution. But what we now call Independence Hall was also the home of the Pennsylvania legislature, because Philadelphia was the capital of Pennsylvania at the time, and the Pennsylvania legislature met in what we now call Independence Hall. And so all they had to do to get the Constitution to Philadelphia or to Pennsylvania was walk it upstairs.
Walk it upstairs.
That was the easy one. They had to walk it upstairs.
Everybody envied Pennsylvania.
Yeah, they got the first look.
Exactly.
They got the first crack at the Constitution. But what's even more interesting, we talk about, or not we talk about, but the people that try and do things in terms of attacking the founders or discrediting the founders, and they do that for their own particular agenda. But part and parcel of that talks about they're rich old white guys that are not inclusive of any other kind of folks. But the fact is, on the very first day, on September 17, 1787, upstairs in Philadelphia, they arranged to print 4,500 of copies of the Constitution for distribution around the state of Pennsylvania. The more curious part of that story that hardly anybody knows is that of those 4,500, only 3,000 of those constitutions were printed in English.
And they chose what language for the remaining 15?
The remaining 1,500 were printed in German. Fully 1/3 of the people in Pennsylvania in 1787 did not speak English, or at least English was not their first language. And so they weren't fluent in English, but rather they were fluent in, and their first language was, in fact, German. And the founders thought that it was really, really important for people, all the people of the country, to understand what this proposed new government was going to be about and how it was going to work. And the only way people understand really difficult concepts or new concepts or important ideas like government is in the language they're most comfortable in.
Exactly.
And so they did that. And I think that story, that beginning story, that very first day story began the process of inclusion that has grown through through the course of the country, with the 15th Amendment and the abolition of slavery and making former slaves citizens, the 19th Amendment for the female vote, the 22nd Amendment, I think, lost a little bit track when 18-year-olds were able to vote.
Right.
So the process of inclusion started on the very first day, when they didn't want people who were non-English speakers to not understand what was being proposed as the governmental organization for the new country.
And actually, if you think about it, that would give a lot of insight to a lot of people who are suggesting English being the official language of the United States. And I wonder how they would weigh in on that.
Yeah, in the first Congress that was convened under the Constitution, there were in fact proposals to make the country dual lingual, with German being the second language. That all official documents would be printed in both English and German at the time. Originally in the original Congress, that was among the proposals. But that's not where they stopped either, because of course many people don't remember this. I remember strange things. But in 1624, what we now know as New York was actually founded as New Amsterdam.
Oh, okay.
And founded by the Dutch. That was New Amsterdam, and it was the capital of what they considered to be New Netherland. But even 150 years later, a little more than 150, about 160 years later, there was still a significant population in the state of New York that their first language remained Dutch.
Dutch, yeah.
And so when the Constitution was printed for distribution in New York and around New York State and New York City, it was not only published in English, it was also published in Dutch. So the actions for inclusion in the founding story are something that I think Americans need to know this, so that when they talk about these guys and they talk about the fact that they wanted to, a bunch of rich old white guys that were creating a country that was going to be a club for them, is kind of the way they kind of try and portray these guys. No, they wanted everybody to understand what they were becoming a part of, and the first steps they took was to include the people that spoke other languages, and so you got to get past the dial 2 for Spanish or whatever, one for English.
Right. And if you fast forward to where we are now that's one of the hot, I guess you could say, progressive terms is inclusion.
Right.
And but it's something that, in a sense, maybe they've taken the term and politicized it, but it's something that's been a part of the American culture for quite some time.
It's been part of the American experience and part of the American ideals ever since the very first day. And they started to grow the political community that was considered to be the founding community. The founding community reached out and started to try and grow the community and try to include other ethnic groups that weren't, say, non-British,
right?
If you will. And so that was the beginning. And so the inclusion, the growth of inclusion is the story of America, and it's the story that happened on the very first day that the Constitution was sent out for ratification around the country. And so I think that just says so much, that particular story, those particular language stories, do so much to dispel the efforts to dismiss the founders.
Right.
Right. So I think that was an important opening for the book. I think is to lead with that information and that story, and so we'll go on from there. But I think that's an important place to start, is the inclusive nature of the founders, the inclusive attitude, because of course Jefferson didn't write some men are created equal.
Right, I know. A few others are also created equal.
Yeah,
right?
And you know what? They understood at the time the dissonance and the failure to meet the rhetoric with the status of life in those days. They understood the problems with the slavery issue and other things. Interesting thing about the Constitution, now that I brought that up, a fellow by the name of Gouverneur Morris that we will talk about more than as this goes on. Gouverneur Morris was the fellow that actually wrote the Constitution. They had, over the 5 months, they'd passed different kinds of resolutions and put together different sections of it, but it was all like in sticky notes and little bits and pieces of paper here.
Post-its.
Oh yeah, Post-its, exactly what we would call Post-its. They say, oh yeah, let's do that amendment, and they approved this and that. And so it was a big pile of papers that there was something called the Committee on Style, and the Committee on Style gave all this material to Gouverneur Morris, and he had all these pieces of paper. And Morris is the one that actually took it all together and gave it form and substance and put it into the 7 articles of the original Constitution with the different subsections of each. No greater authority than James Madison said that the pen of Gouverneur Morris is actually responsible for the style and the organization of the Constitution. And who knows Gouverneur Morris? We're going to tell some sidelights from time to time. So we'll get into some it's actually Gouverneur Morris. We'll get into some Gouverneur Morris gossip. Gouverneur Morris had a peg leg.
Okay.
And as time goes,
though.
Pardon me?
No parrot.
No parrot. No parrot. Although my nephew says he's his favorite founder, and whenever I bring up Gouverneur Morris, Alex always goes "Arr," because Gouverneur Morris had a peg leg. But the basic public story is that he got his leg caught in a carriage wheel, and that wound up with the amputation below the knee. Apparently, the real fact is that he was involved in some other things that he shouldn't have been involved in, and a husband came home. And he jumped out of a second-story window, and and that's what happened to Gouverneur Morris's leg.
Yeah.
So and while these guys should not be dismissed as in the way that they are dismissed, but what they should be is recognized as human beings,
Exactly.
with the failures and the failings of that we have. But they were also
plenty of success, and of course they're human. So there are some issues.
There's backstories. They do.
Exactly.
They do. There's very human things that occur through the course of their lives. On the other hand, here Gouverneur Morris. We'll go back to him for a moment. When he got a draft of the preamble to the Constitution, which famously opens with "We the people." When Gouverneur Morris got the draft of the preamble, it said "We the people of the states of New Hampshire, and New York, and Georgia, and Alabama, and Virginia, and on to the 13 of them, Rhode Island." Gouverneur Morris is the guy that took that section of the Constitution and said, "We the people of the United States." This is the guy that actually created a country with that group of words. If he would have left it alone and it would have said, "We the people of this list of colonies or this list of independent states," it would have been like a League of Nations kind of thing. It would not have been a country. But with the stroke of his pen, and nobody knows this guy, with the stroke of nobody knows the guy with the peg leg, right? But with the stroke of his pen, he actually created a nation,
right?
When he said, "We the people of the United States," and that's these are things that unfortunately you've been involved in education, civics, social studies. Do you ever see that in the curriculums?
No. That's unfortunately those are the nuts and bolts of the history that makes it enjoyable that were bypassed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it not only makes it enjoyable, it really does promote understanding of stuff. When of course they had the Declaration of Independence, and when before the Constitution 11 years earlier in 1776, And Thomas Jefferson would talk about my country. He was talking about Virginia. When John Adams would say my country, he was talking about Massachusetts, you know, and on and on and on for all these guys. Their countries were those individual independent states.
Right.
And Morris brought it all together. Morris brought it all together.
With just a pen.
With his pen.
Exactly.
And you see that phrase everywhere, we the people. And the second part of that is we the people of the United States. And it was created through that one rewrite of the list of the 13 states. So there's amazing stuff, and I think people can appreciate better if they know some of this stuff.
Exactly.
And we're gonna go on and do some more. We'll address some constitutional consideration. We're going to talk about the preamble soon, but one of the other things in this book is broken into 3 different volumes, and each volume kind of covers a different section of the Constitution. But there's an introduction to Volume 1, and the introduction to Volume 1 talks about the fact that this is the first nation that was created on the basis of a philosophy, on the basis of ideas, on the basis of a shared understanding of what we're supposed to be about. All the countries in the history of the world before then every one of them had either some sort of tribal beginning, or they were imposed by the exercise of raw, actually military power more than anything else. And so
a monarchy in sense.
Yeah, monarchy. Whether it was Genghis Khan, whether it was a Khan, or whether it was a king, or whether it was an emperor, or a prince, or a sultan, whatever, or a chieftain, whatever you want to give the title to, was some sort of the history of human organization, with the small period of the Roman Republic, which served as a major influence on the establishment of the United States. With the exception of the Roman Republic, that was the history of man up to this point in time. So what these guys were doing to create something like this was unheard of. It was unknown. And for all the failings in jumping out of second-story windows to avoid other kinds of problems, they did some amazing things in ways that, unfortunately, many Americans neither know about nor understand, and we don't teach these things, and we don't. Sometimes I think they're not taught on purpose because it serves a political purpose for other people to slice us and dice us into interest groups rather than have us understand our shared heritage as Americans.
Yeah, and it's that's one of the advantages, I guess you could say, to communism, in it makes it easy to divide.
Yes.
And that's what they did. So, and with that, we just covered just a fraction of the introduction.
Yes.
And if you like it, please check into Constitutional Soundbites, presented by SAT Media. And we'll be bringing you this entire book.
We're going to be going on for a while. Hopefully, by the time we get through this, I'll be the Attorney General of the state of Illinois.
There you go.
Just a shameless plug for my
there you go.
campaign.
And we'll have to continue remotely.
We'll have to continue remotely. But I would think that this would be consistent with what the Attorney General should be doing.
Exactly.
The Attorney General should not only be representing the people there, he should also hopefully be educating the people on the law that he's charged with executing.
Right. So thanks, Dave. And please check it out.